We obviously have a very hefty show today, but we have talked about, of course, the the police raids along with Biden's and the military's targeting of anarchists, socialists, communists, what we warned you about. We also talked about the sanctions, and now we're going to focus on the Pentagon, because the Pentagon, guys, is when you're talking about defund the police and abolition of police, you're never going to get that when you don't pay attention to the foreign policy aspect, the state agencies, the military industrial complex, and the national security apparatus that has worked and now is merging with the technocratic side of the corporations in order to just crack down not only on the ground via anti-protest bills, but also via the internet, via censoring the free press. That's another thing we've talked about. The reason we're so focused on these subjects right now is because for a long time, we've been getting warnings about it, and people completely put these things aside, focusing on social issues. And one of the things that America has done is, unfortunately, put too much of a focus on symbolic gestures instead of the very things that are the fabric of what has been perceived as a free society in America. We are losing our right to free speech, our right to the Second Amendment. We're losing our right to freedom of the press. We're losing our rights to having your rights read. There's warrantless seizures, warrantless searches that are happening now. Those are the fundamental rights as an American, if you want to be patriotic, and all of those are out the window. And you can't pick and choose when you fight for those, depending on the ideology that you fall into. And that's what we're trying to point out here. The Pentagon is behind a lot of this. So there was a resolution introduced in the House, the Defund the Pentagon resolution. And so Jonny is going to come on and go over that. So
where's Jonny?
Where's
They
Jonny?
kidnapped Jonny Tsunami.
Where's Jonny?
Jonny! He's there. He's there. He's there. We got him. Let's bring him on in, Oz.
There we go. Say something.
Hey, Jonny Tsunami,
okay,
ladies
great.
and gentlemen. How you doing, buddy?
Okay. Good, good. It's been a fantastic show so far. Really interesting. Real quick, I mean, apart from the topic that we're about to discuss, there's a so John McAfee just died, right? So
yeah,
in jail. On his Instagram, just like 30 minutes ago, it was a Q was posted on his Instagram.
What?
Oh no, here come the QAnoners.
So I'm like, what the fuck is that? So I don't know. I took a screenshot of it, but it's on Instagram right now.
We'll talk more about that Friday, I guess.
Oh my lord, yeah.
Because there's already so many theories. He didn't kill himself. All these things happening. We don't know. That's the thing. We don't know anything at this time. But
apparently, Slow News Day had him on, and he had sentiments that saying that I'm not going to whack myself, right? So.
Wow. Well, we'll have to get Steve on too to talk about that stuff. Guys, this is like one thing after another right now happening, Jonny, right? Like so many things are happening right now. So give us your breakdown of the Pentagon, because this is very important. I think this legislation that usually goes through people's heads. There's so much that they're passing while they put out, AOC, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Sam Cedar, this idiot over here. Like these idiots focus on all of that because that gets you the most clicks, that gets you the most everything. But really, what's happening right now in front of us is really scary.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird, interesting news. I mean, there's a lot of shit going on in the world right now, but I think this resolution that I found last night is pretty interesting. I think it's a good first step. So about a week ago, HRES 476, you can see it on the screen, was introduced into the House on June 15, 2021. It's called Expressing the Sense of the House of Representatives Regarding Wasteful Pentagon Spending and Supporting Cuts to the Bloated Defense Budget. So the title is, you see it there. It was introduced by Representative Barbara Lee. She's a Democrat from California, and it was co-sponsored by Jan Schakowsky, Democrat of Illinois. You can go to the next slide there, Oz. There's Barbara Lee. It was introduced by her. And then Jan Schakowsky and Jared Huffman. I want to put the faces on the screen because I feel like it's really interesting so you guys know what so we have a face to the legislation, right? They co-sponsored it. So Jan Schakowsky and Jared Huffman, also Ilhan Omar from Minnesota, and Mark DeSaulnier. So I just wanted to show all of that to y'all. And then to reiterate a point before I get into this resolution, because I'm going to read a lot of it. We've talked about it before about how resolutions are almost kind of meaningless. They're like they're just like statements, right? And they're not really any type of law or anything like that. So I actually have the definition of what a simple resolution is. A simple resolution, HRES or SRES, is a proposal that addresses matters entirely within the prerogative of one chamber or the other. It requires neither the approval or of the other chamber nor the signature of the president, and it doesn't have the force of law. Simple resolutions concern the rules of one chamber or express the sentiments of a single chamber. So most resolutions are about condolences or deceased family members of Congress or somebody they want to recognize and stuff. Some are about stances on issues though, and this is one of those. So before I go over, I just want to emphasize that I expect to see more after this. And I think this is a decent first step in this particular resolution because there are so many things in here in this resolution that I had no idea about in regards to the Pentagon and Department of Defense. They laid out all these facts. So let's expose their ass, okay?
Yeah.
So Oz, if you can actually click on the link. Yeah.
By the way, I just want to point out that Barbara Lee was the only congressional member to vote against the AUMF. So the fact that it's coming from a person like Barbara Lee is not a surprise. This is way long overdue though too, Johnny. I want to point it out that like they're doing this now. We've been talking about the Pentagon budget being bloated for so long, but please continue.
It is way overdue, Pastor. You're absolutely right. It begins with this sentence: expressing the sense of the House of Representatives regarding wasteful Pentagon spending and supporting cuts to the bloated defense budget. It then goes on to list a lot of damning reasons of why this resolution should pass. And I hope a further bill will be passed, right? So here's some big points that stood out to me. So I'm gonna read it. It says, whereas Pentagon spending since 9/11 adjusted for inflation has increased by almost 50%, whereas the United States has spent and obligated an estimated $6.4 trillion on military operations since 9/11, 2001, and has been at war constantly since then. Whereas the Pentagon's budget in fiscal year 2021 totaled $740.5 billion, including for base and overseas contingency operations. I'm going to be calling those OCOs as we go along. Whereas while Pentagon spending continues to rise, spending on diplomacy has stalled or been reduced, resulting in an over-reliance on our military action and an insufficient use of diplomatic and other non-military tools. I thought that was pretty important to put in there because it's kind of saying we're over-bloated in the budget, and when we can, use diplomatic and non-military tools. So that was important. Whereas only 1/3 of discretionary spending is available for important domestic priorities that help reduce poverty and inequality, including public health, education, housing, energy, diplomacy, and others. Whereas the Pentagon failed in its first ever agency-wide audit in November 2018. So I had no idea about that, that they failed an audit in 2018. Whereas the Department of Defense spent nearly $1 billion in activities related to that audit, to that 2018 audit, and achieving an agency-wide audit could take years if it is ever to achieve one, let alone pass. Whereas the audit revealed significant technological systems, security, and organizational deficiencies in the Department of Defense's financial management systems. Whereas the Pentagon's first audit, that was the 2018 audit, was the first audit that occurred nearly 30 years after the passage of the Chief Financial Officers Act of 1990, which established a requirement for annual audits of financial statements for federal agencies. So that was the first audit since 1990. and they should have been doing those audits since 1990 annually. You know what I'm saying?
Every year.
So that's something I had no idea about.
Yeah.
Whereas the coronavirus pandemic has made clear that the Pentagon spending has not kept us safe from the major drivers of insecurity we face in the 21st century. The super expensive Pentagon did nothing to help us for COVID. Good point to make, I thought. Whereas in fiscal year 2020, $10.5 billion was appropriated to the Pentagon and the CARES Act above its regular fiscal year appropriations for a total of $756.5 billion in fiscal year 2020, whereas the cost of a single F-35 made by Lockheed Martin could have purchased over 2,800 ventilators to respond to COVID-19. For all those people who believe that more ventilators could help, this is a good point to make. Although y'all already know our stance on treatments for COVID, and I'm not going to get into that. Whereas the Pentagon continues to reveal high levels of waste and fraud, including, for example, and then they list all these reasons. The Pentagon diverted $1 billion in funds intended for personal protective equipment to prevent the spread of COVID for defense contractors to produce jet engine parts, body armor, and dress uniforms. So they diverted $1 billion for masks to other stuff. The Pentagon awarded a $7 million cloud computing contract to a one-person company, which is interesting. I'm kind of curious about what company that is. The Defense Logistics Agency lost track of $800 million in construction projects. In 2019, the Pentagon spent $4.6 million on crab and lobster and an end-of-the-year spree.
How much?
$4.6 million on crab and lobster.
Well, that must have been a hell of a crab and lobster fest. Jesus Christmas.
Yeah, what, like each lobster place, like what, like $12-20? I don't know.
Well, it was the party, Johnny. You know, they had little lobster things hanging on
like
the wall,
$50,
and, you know,
like $60.
Yeah, but they had little mini lobster dolls and stuff on the tables that you could take
get it
home.
wholesale,
And
they're not paying retail. This is the Pentagon we're talking about.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Department of Defense Inspector General found the Pentagon had to spend $300 million to repair defective spare parts for the $1.4 trillion F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program. So that's a fuck ton of money.
Yeah.
In fiscal year 2020, the DoD made $5 billion in improper payments. $5 billion. Whereas, okay, so that's the list there. And then whereas the military budget accounts for more than half of all discretionary spending.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I mean, that's most of our discretionary spending is going into the military. Whereas every hour, taxpayers are paying $32.08 million for the total cost of wars since 2001. And these endless wars have not made Americans safer or brought democracy or stability to the Middle East. Indeed, they have further destabilized the region and show no sign of actually ending or achieving any of the long ago stated goals. We've talked about this, you know, it's a good point to make. The other thing that we've talked about is whereas interviews with senior military leaders and other senior officials showed many believed the war in Afghanistan to be unwinnable and knowingly misled the public for years. That's something we've talked about on the Convo Couch. Whereas in addition to defense-based spending in fiscal year 2021, Congress provided $69 billion for defense, OCO, which has enabled continuing military actions and wars in several countries without specific congressional authorization and many almost hidden from the American people. So I want to clarify what this OCO is, the Overseas Contingency Operations. I didn't know about this. OCO funding is originally like extra funding, and it's to handle conflicts that were assumed to be temporary and had uncertain costs. However, as the conflicts became protracted and their costs became more predictable, the use of OCO funding nonetheless has persisted. Ideally, funding for national priorities would be appropriated through a regular budget process, but OCO funding has remained significant over time, comprising a major part of our overall annual budget. So it's just an extra wad of cash for the Department of Defense that didn't exist before. And it's only the original reasons for why it was supposed to be used is not the way they're using it now. Whereas the DoD abused emergency powers to transfer approximately $10 billion in funds to build an unnecessary and immoral wall at the southern border. So, you get that in there. The Pentagon helped fund that, I'm sure, in any administration, right? Whereas spending on sustaining and modernizing the excessively large United States nuclear arsenal is projected by Congressional Budget Office at nearly $500 billion between fiscal years 2019 and 2028. So they've included the arsenal of nukes in this resolution, whereas the United States spends more on defense spending than the next 7 countries in the world, including China, Saudi Arabia, Russia, the UK, India, France, and Japan combined. And we've talked about this. We've shown this meme. We've shown it. It's crazy that they have this in the resolution. Whereas despite concerns about depriving the troops of funding in 2019, half the military budget went directly to military manufacturing corporations whose top 5 CEOs in 2018 averaged $22 million in salaries, while 15.3% members of the armed forces serving on active duty and their families reported they were food insecure. So, a lot of the times, some politicians make the argument that, we don't want to cut military spending, or we don't want to cut military funding because the troops will be affected. But this part in this resolution is pointing out the fact that that's not true, that all these CEOs are making that money. They're making $22 million in salaries, and these active duty, they're working class as well, that they're on food insecure. They're not funding the army here. We're not funding the people there.
The troops.
Whereas
we're not funding the actual troops. Yeah. We're not funding them. Yeah. We're not giving them raises. We're not taking care of them when they come home. We're not paying for their medical bills. It's disgusting because the money does go, and you just pointed it out, Johnny, that it goes right into the CEO's pockets of these defense contractors. Half of that money goes into their pockets.
Absolutely. Whereas any spending cuts to the Pentagon could be reinvested in other important domestic priorities to help reduce poverty and increase economic opportunity in communities across the country. Defund, this is a defund and reinvest into the people. This is what this statement is saying. Big deal that this language is even in here, is, in my opinion. This is all the stuff that we talk about. Defund the Pentagon, reinvest it into the people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Can I say something though, real quick about it? It's like,
real quick,
this is great that they're listing out all this stuff, right? They're listing out all this stuff. They're giving you detail of what's going on, but you're a little bit late to the party. As we know, who was in charge of this budget was Adam Smith of Washington, Oz's good friend over there, who was actually in charge of making sure that this budget was managed properly and stuff. But why didn't they raise those concerns then when they were making this budget? Why did they all just keep quiet about it? Never call a press conference, never have a resolution. This is a little bit too late. It's like a giant virtue signal. And I also want to point out that inside that goddamn fucking audit, billions of dollars were not explaining what happened, what the Pentagon did with that money. So we don't know. They just took that money and they did whatever they want with it. This was in 2019. And remember, we made the joke like, fam, I'm looking for 20 billion under the couch. Yeah. We lost it somewhere. Where did the Pentagon put it? It's just ridiculous. And it's just a little bit too late with this shit. They should have been having press conferences when they were doing this bill. They should have called out people and talked about what they're spending on this bill when it happened, not a resolution now, because guess what's coming next year? Another bill, right? And are they going to wait a little bit late and say we should have a resolution to talk against it? No, talk against it when it's being produced. Talk against it when they're writing that bill. Talk against who's working on that bill, because those those Democrats that are all for this, like Adam Smith, need to be called the fuck out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why I said in the beginning, I want to see more. But let me finish up, and then we can talk a little bit more about this. Whereas the Pentagon could significantly decrease its spending by, so here they go on to list directly, lists of actions that could be taken to decrease the budget of the Pentagon. So it says, number one, eliminating war funding absorbed into the base budget upon the closure of the Overseas Contingency Operations, the OCO account. So they want to close that account. That's one of the things they list as an action. Two, closing 60% of foreign bases and saving $90 billion. 60% of foreign, this shit's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. But they're calling in this resolution for closing to 60% of foreign bases, and it'd save $90 billion. Ending wars and war funding and saving $66 billion. Yeah, let's see that. Cutting unnecessary weapons that are obsolete, excessive, and dangerous, and saving $57.9 billion. Cutting military overhead by 15% and saving $38 billion. Cutting private service contracting by 15% and saving $26 billion. Eliminating the redundant and wasteful Space Force and saving $15.2 billion. Yeah, so Biden hasn't eliminated that yet, right? Wasn't he talking shit about it?
Yeah.
Ending use it or lose it contract spending and saving $18 billion. Freezing operations and maintenance budget levels and saving $6 billion. And number 10, completing President Biden's announced plans to withdraw all U.S. troops from Afghanistan by September 11th, 2021, and reducing spending accordingly. And those are some actions that they, in this resolution, they kind of list out that could be taken. Of course, again, it's a resolution, so it's not saying that this will happen, right? So resolved that it is the sense of the House of Representatives that more money to the Pentagon does not buy us more security. Okay, so they're writing their summary now. Okay, I agree. More money to the Pentagon does not buy us more security. 2, Congress intends to reduce defense waste, increase transparency, and reduce or eliminate poor management practices at the DoD. So more transparency, I'm down with that. 3, Congress can and should make significant cuts to the budget of the Pentagon while simultaneously improving support for the members of the armed forces by reducing unnecessary spending and reinvesting in our troops. So that is good. Reinvest in actually reinvest in the troops. And I hope, for PTSD recovery and health services. 4, Congress must exercise aggressive oversight to track and account for the money that is being spent and to ensure that the Department of Defense follows through with performing annual audits, which they haven't done since 2018 and they haven't done since 1990. Implementing recommendations and achieving a clean audit as quickly as possible. So they're calling for what is it? Where is it? Achieving a clean audit as quickly as possible. Congress encourages, this is the one, number 5. Congress encourages the DoD to complete its full audit before the end of this calendar year and report back to Congress immediately. I mean, it's a resolution, so they probably wouldn't do it, even if this resolution passes, which I don't even know if it's going to pass. Congress encourages the Department of State and other agencies to use combined power diplomacy, foreign assistance, and a strong and fair economy to ensure our nation is safe. I'm not sure what they're talking about there. I mean, they're saying use more diplomacy and foreign assistance instead of using a military option,
which
right?
could
that would be something new.
Yeah, but they could also put foreign assistance as humanitarian aid and put NGOs there.
Yeah.
So that kind of leaves it a little open.
Yeah. Congress supports the elimination of the Overseas Contingency Operations account, which makes waging war too easy. So they want to eliminate the OCO, which is great, which we talked about. I explained to you what that was. Congress supports moves to reduce the priority given to war in our foreign policy and our current war-based national economy by using significant cuts up to $350 billion, as detailed above, which I talked about, from current budget plans, while using the funds to increase our diplomatic capacity and for domestic programs that will keep our nation and our people safer. So that's pretty much the whole resolution there.
Yeah.
I think, it's a really, really detailed breakdown of how shitty and excessively expensive the Pentagon is. and advocates for defunding and reinvestment into the people, and details budget cuts that could be made in a bill after. But so I got to say, I haven't seen a resolution this detailed like this, right? I've seen a few resolutions. I haven't seen one this detailed. So I like that. It's pretty good. And they're putting all the facts together and putting it on paper as a legislative resolution. I think it's a decent first step. Acknowledge the problem first, right? And then what I'm going to be looking out for, though, is not only the passage of this, but the introduction of a bill that compels action. They have the authority to compel action. Then if the resolution or bill doesn't pass, a mass movement to get it passed needs to happen. I'll be looking for Ilhan and Barbara Lee and the co-sponsors of this resolution to either show up at actions to directly reference this resolution, or have press releases, or blast it on social media, or put out a call to be somewhere for a protest. This is the next step that I don't think we're not going to see. I don't know if we're going to see this. Legislators using social media presence to mobilize thousands, if not millions, of their followers or people across the country. They have the power to do that. They have the power to do that. It would be a huge first step if somebody actually did that. I'm even curious if there's some bullshit rules about someone in Congress not being able to do that. But if that's the case, that needs to be eliminated. But can't mobilize people if you're in Congress. I feel like, I don't know if that's a rule or not. It shouldn't be a rule if it is. So perhaps they think doing something like that would be risking a multi-term, membership to Congress. I feel like it goes back to the election system and the failure of everybody recognizing the lack of transparency in our public election system. Because you wouldn't have to worry about getting reelected if you don't play ball. If we had Bernie win the primary, if we had Bernie go up against Hillary, things would be different right now. They rigged that election. They rigged 2016. They rigged the 2020 primary, and then the 2020 general is in question with so many things that are not, the proprietary software, the private companies printing ballots, the hours-long lines, the fact that it's not a national holiday. There's so many things. But if our elections were straight, we'd have many more grassroots people in office, no doubt in my mind. And I feel like we would have a leftist president too. So your guys' thoughts on this resolution here?
Well, I think it's a great blueprint of what we can stop the next budget, because these budgets come every year, right? So, my beef is always like, you're crying about it after it happens. Like, where were you? Why weren't you mobilizing out all this money that was just spent, that was laid out right here by Barbara Lee before it happened? Like, why this bill was going through appropriations in Congress, you should have been bitching and complaining about it then, bringing attention to it then. So if we do get some movement from people on this bill and they start recognizing these things, if in fact, out of the blue, Ilhan calls press conferences and talks about it and says, look what's going on. Look at all this useless, stupid spending. We're waging war. 60% of our budget goes towards war. We need to change it. It would be a good step of changing it in the future. I mean, because you can just see everything we talked about. Our Congress is just infested with the military-industrial complex. You look at the whole sanctions regime thing. It's all about who's our enemy, who's our adversary, how do we change their behavior, how do we enact an act of war against these people to get them to play ball, to get them to have our monetary system. And that's what this is all about. All those weapons that are spent right there are spent to keep these other countries in our monetary system. We want global control with the monetary system so that our elites, I shouldn't say our elites, the Western elites or the Western predator class maintain control. So even though it's a resolution now, if it's a blueprint for the future on stopping the next one, like I say, Adam Smith, right there in Oz's hometown, he was the one in charge of this budget. He gets so much money and kickback from the military-industrial complex and stuff like that. But I look at it more right now as a big virtue signal than anything about really stopping actual policies moving forward. Because we would stop, because this is not a new thing, fam. Bernie Sanders 20 years ago said, like, who are you worried about, Iran? Who are you worried about, Iraq? We spend more than the next 7 countries combined. And that's still the same. And nothing is changed.
But people don't know that. People still don't know that. So I think it serves a purpose to go over this legislation that's out there. Yes, it is. It is a virtue signal if you're not going to push anything to actually make it actual legislation. But we have to remember, guys, we cannot rely on politicians to push this. What they're going to do is put out resolutions. But in order to actually feel compelled to make it into actual law, the people have to compel them, because there's no other way. Like we said, electoralism isn't it. It's not. We can't continue incremental pushes like this and wait till after the fact. The thing that is going to force the hand of politicians, because they're not going to do it out of the goodness of their own heart. The thing that's going to force the hand of politicians is people actually having an anti-war movement, a movement that stands against all anti-interventionism or interventionism from the United States. That is an anti-interventionist movement, an anti-imperialist movement that says hands off everybody at this point, because we keep having hands off Venezuela, hands off Syria, hands off this. No, hands off everybody. Cutting ties too, that I didn't see here mentioned, because I don't think that's even allowable. Israel is one of the largest areas that our money goes into, and they're committing genocide. They are committing, whether it's intentional or slow genocide. And that there's a reason why Israel isn't mentioned, because believe it or not, the Israeli military occupation and the regime of Israel is far more powerful than we can even conceive. It is up there. That we need Israel. Biden told you, if we didn't have it, we'd create it. And so that's something that I think people need. They need to understand. We can't wait on Ilhan Omar or Barbara Lee or all these politicians to just do this. You have to make them do it. Yeah. You have to compel them to do it.
Yeah. And the last thing I'm going to say really quick, Johnny, is the thing I'm concerned about is that they take that money that they're using, that they're spending overseas to fight terrorism abroad, that they come home and they switch it to fighting domestic terrorism at home. That is a big concern, because anytime you start pulling out all these countries, when they say close 60% of the bases, what are you going to do with those weapons? You're going to bring them home and give them to the police departments to use against us, because that's what they did last time. And I think this next part, when you're going to talk about the HR 256, which is so important, and I'll make my comments after you get into this, because this is the AUMF. Go ahead, Johnny, take it away, and please.
Yeah, real quick, I just got to point out that Ilhan was the only co-sponsor to this resolution, to the last resolution. And she was the only member of the squad that was a co-sponsor to it. So that's really interesting.
They should all be on it.
Yeah.
Along the same anti-imperialist vibes, right? Because defunding the Pentagon is definitely anti-imperialist. 6 days ago, on June 16th, the House passed HR 256 to repeal the authorization for use of military force against Iraq resolution of 2002. So this passed in the House, and it basically simply says, be enacted that the authorization for the use of force against Iraq is hereby repealed. So it was repealed. And it wasn't just, I want to make clear that although HR 256 only shows that the authorization for use of military was repealed, if you actually dig deeper in the actions of how the bill was passed, we see that in order for this to get passed with no argument or provisions to it, 2 other resolutions were passed. So I have a screenshot, I think, Oz, in the next slide. But you can also go to it. If you go to the list of actions are right there. Congress.gov, people should be looking at it. I believe the next screenshot should show you. Yes, so that screenshot, yeah. So it says resolution provides for consideration under a closed rule and provides for consideration of HR 1187 under a structured rule, and then it mentions another resolution there. So 2 other resolutions were passed to get this passed. So one of them has multiple things in the resolution, ranging from establishing sustainable finance advisory committee, and in there, I don't know if you can go to it as the next slide. Right, so it's called HR 1187, Corporate Governance Improvement and Investor Protection Act. So this was passed in the House with no argument or anything like that, with no provisions or anything, to pass the repeal of the other authorization act. So this is for another show, because there's a lot of shit in there, and this one, and I don't know if you can go to the page that I linked there, Oz.
I think this one.
After that, the one that you show, 1187.
38.
Yeah, slide 39.
39.
So there's
there
that. That's GovTrack, and then slide 40 has the link to the actual thing. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about it. You know, it will need Senate approval. So this got passed in the House without anything, and basically there's something about ESG disclosure simplification. It's a huge ass bill. There's some things that seem interesting. Title II says shareholder political transparency, which is interesting. I want to read more into that. Greater accountability and pay is something in this bill. Climate risk disclosure. Something about, I was reading some into this a little bit, and it was something about like building this committee to then provide reasons for what you should invest in, and disclosure of tax havens and offshoring. And then at the bottom, you know, there's a lot more titles, and then they disclose some Title 10, it says Uyghur forced labor disclosure. So there's something in there that they put in for the Uyghurs. This is HR 1187. So that, HR 1187. So my point in showing that, along with HR 1187, there's another one that got passed with no issue or problems, no revision or provisions. And that is resolution for HRES 467. And that's only about budget allocations for the Committee of Appropriations. I'm just showing you that Congress cannot just pass one bill simply, that there's always deals being made, basically, it looks like. So HR 256 will go to the Senate to be approved as well. So let's see what happens. HR 256 is that one which repeals the use of authorization for
slide 42
force in Iraq.
Yep.
Yeah. See, instead of Bernie Sanders talking about Joe Biden is my friend and I feel a lot comfortable with him more than I did the Trump administration, he should be saying,
Hillary Clinton.
Ladies and gentlemen, HR 256 is now moved through the House. It is coming to the Senate. We need to pass and destroy this awful, awful authoritarian use of military force against the Iraq resolution. What does that mean? It means that the president, no matter who he is, whether it be the last guy, Trump, Biden, or the next guy, cannot go to war without the consent of Congress. Very, very important. It will save a lot of lives. But is he talking about that? Is he saying this shit right now? No, he's not. The same way the whole Democrats were quiet when Barack Obama came to office. Remember, they're like, oh, dude, they're gonna get rid of the authorization use of military force that was passed under George Bush after 9/11 the very next day, because everybody was scared shitless. They're like, oh, just got to pass it. Got to give the president the power right now. They just took down the Twin Towers. We can't oppose anything. Only Barbara Lee, who produced that resolution you just talked about, was the only one to stand up against this act. Now it's 20-something odd years later, and we're still looking at the authorized use of military force, which means that the president can go around Congress, doesn't even have to seek their approval to go and kill the same people who try to kill my father. That's what George Bush said, right? I mean, Biden got in, Obama got in. A lot of people thought it would be squash for him, but no, he used it himself to do his drone warfare all over the place. And what do we get out of it? Syria, Libya, the whole 9 yards. So I'm very interested to see why those progressive champions aren't talking about this right now, because this right here, HR 256, fucking huge. Huge.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that this is like super under the radar. Like I haven't seen this. I don't watch mainstream media, but you know, you don't see it on the news. I haven't seen any other independent channels talking about it. So your opinions, fam?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's good that this is happening. But again, I don't think anything will happen without public knowledge and public outcry and public movement, because They have no reason. While we're the most propagandized nation in the world, we pay more attention to reality TV spats between Marjorie Taylor Greene, AOC, spats between independent media, spats between whatever it is. Like, we're the reality TV nation. And so unless Americans start paying attention as to where your money is going, and if you believe that your money, you know, if you believe in the system, you know, besides MMT, like if you believe your dollars are funding whatever, this war and that war and these sanctions and all of that, then you should care, because you're not benefiting from it. Even if you don't care about other people being, you know, blown up, you're not benefiting from it. So it's got to come from an anti-war movement. And I think that's why I give accolades to people like Magnus, who are trying to push this sort of unity of like, hey, I don't care who you voted for, but let's end these wars. Then we can deal with each other. Then we can sit down and have a situation where we have an even keel to debate our ideas, debate our ideology, whether you're for reforming capitalism. And I'm not, right? Like, but we can't even do that when we have an encroaching fascistic takeover that the Biden administration is pushing and an ever expanding military industrial complex. We can't do that, guys. We can't fight about Medicare for all in the gulags. We can't. It's just like, what's going to happen? That's where we're at. And so I think this is a good step. And I think breaking it down is a good thing, so people know that it's there. But I think the push needs to happen ground up.
Yeah. John, where did you find all this information? Because it's important to point it out, because this is what, once again, if the squad was who we thought they were, right, they would be talking about this like, listen, guys, we just pushed this through the House. We got to get the Senate on board for this. This is a chance. 30-something odd years, 20-something odd years, not 30, 21 years right now. Okay. We've had the AUMF. We have to seize the moment right now. We got it through the House. Let's call your senators. Let's push to get this passed. How did you find this information? Because I haven't heard anything from progressives online or Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, who were supposed to be anti-war progressives. How did you hear about this stuff? What made you get to this story?
Well, I saw a leftist meme page share a tweet from Ilhan, and I'm like, oh, you know, that's a nice tweet, but is there any legislation behind it? Or, you know, it was like an anti-war tweet. I'm like, is there any legislation behind that? And then I was linked to her page. I wasn't linked to any resolution or anything, so I had to do some digging. But because obviously they don't know, no one knows, no one looks into the congressional record of Congress, right? So I looked through it and I found there's a lot of things that, you know, that she is co-sponsored. Ilhan Omar. So if you go to congress.gov/member/Ilhan Omar, you'll find everything that she's been co-sponsored or introduced to, right? So I looked at the most recent stuff, and this was one up there, and so was the HR Repeal Authorization Act. So Defund the Pentagon, I'm like, hey, well, at least it's on paper. And I'm like, how the hell have I not heard about this? And why aren't leftist pages even talking about this? You know, it's exactly. A big deal to even recognize all the Pentagon's bullshit. Like, you're almost putting a target on your back by doing that, especially in Congress. So you know, I'm happy that it's there, but the next steps need to be taken. The next step has to be taken. So I think I feel like they can't even talk about this shit. But if we make a huge storm about it and shit, like if we make a big deal about it, if everybody goes to the Convo Couch store to grab your Defund the Pentagon shirt, and
right here,
get it up, Oz. Next one, number 43.
Nice transition.
There you go, Johnny.
You can get yourself a shirt and rep it. And I also have I just made this design for the anti-imperialist one. I gotta get that shit.
Nice.
I'm wearing that to the gym. But the Defund the Pentagon one, you know, I have the face mask one, and I've had people walk up to me like, oh, hey, cool mask and shit. And yeah, I'm down with that and stuff. So it gets people talking. So, you know, visit our store. You can grab that. You know, it's finally, the store is up. This is the premiere of our store. You can see this little picture here.
Order your stuff.
You notice that the guy with the fam shirt is kind of holding the hand with the person that says, I love Putin with American flag. And the Defund the Pentagon person is hanging out with the vegan but will eat the rich person. It's just a great party going on over here, fams.
Guys, it's
get your
awesome.
I love
It's
Putin
up.
shirts for 4th of July. That shit will be hilarious.
Oh, yeah, for 4th of July.
Oh, yes. I'm totally wearing mine for the 4th of July.
There's the Defund the Pentagon mask. Yeah, it goes vegan, but we'll eat the rich.
Yeah, that's right, guys. For all my vegans out there.
Oz, can you take away Johnny's screen for 2 seconds so you can see the Defund the Pentagon mask really quick? There it is. Look at that. That's the mask Johnny's been pimping.
Well, we don't even need masks anymore.
I know, right?
Well, actually, you do need them in the Uber still here.
Oh, in the Ubers.
Yeah, I found that. Okay, so Johnny, you have the Convo Couch .store. Use code fuck Biden, fuck Trump for 15% off.
Yeah.
Slide 46. There you go. Fuck Biden, fuck Trump.
For everybody that's watching, thank you for watching. You
fuck
can use
Biden, fuck Trump for 15% off.
For 15% off. And the shirts are already.
John, I gotta say, dude, stellar work, man. Awesome shit. Way to bring it to the table.
Yep.
Way to find it. I saw you doing hours of research to get all this shit done, but it was well worth it. And people can make their assessment on what's going on. You know, I still am looking at the fact that this stuff wasn't called out when they were making this budget, when they were doing this. This is the time. And it's one thing to say, I'm going to sign a resolution. It's another thing to use and mobilize your people, your followers to get in the street or get on the phone to call Congress to actually make this legislation stick. Moving forward, the fact that it says like we need to cut that Pentagon budget in half. Well, that budget, you know, those are the people who are running this place, this world, and it's a very big, you know, big group to push back against. But it's what needs to be done in the future. This is not something that's new. This Pentagon budget's been out of hand for a long time. We hear it all the time. We spend more on the Pentagon than the next 7 to 8 to 9 to 10 countries combined. So, I mean, there's a lot of positives here. I'm glad that Ilhan Omar and Barbara Lee are putting this out there, but a little bit late to the party, fam. That's my personal opinion. And I want to stop the next budget.
Yeah, I'd rather it be than nothing. I mean, at this point, I mean, I'm glad it's being out there. Hopefully people start understanding we need to stop fighting amongst, focusing on the Proud Boy and Antifa, on any of these groups. Focus on fighting the establishment. Focus on fighting the people at the top, the people who are pulling the strings, the state agencies, the merging of the technocratic the corporations and these multi-billionaire companies, the privatization of our industries, the fourth industrial revolution, what we aim to do to the global south. I have an update on Peru coming up on Friday. Should be done by the article by then. You guys, this is really, really bad in Peru. The military is on guard for stopping a coup or stopping a protest of the coup. There's more and more information coming out there. Our empire and our imperialism and the OAS, what they do. This is all part of it. So this is why we focus on these topics and why we will continue focusing on them.
Yeah. Johnny, great stuff. Anything else before we read some super rays?
I almost feel like we should start this Defund the Pentagon movement. Maybe we should praise Ilhan and all them for introducing this resolution and then encourage them to take the next step. Because I don't know, there's some reason for why they're not talking about it, right? There's some reason for what there's no press release about it. It looks like when AOC did the Easter egg, whatever IG live thing, she was telling people to organize and shit, right? So I don't know. If we make a big deal about it and if it gets national media attention, then that's something that maybe they'll be compelled to do. And we'll see. I mean, I want to see a ton of Defund the Pentagon shirts on September 11th, 2021. Maybe that's the one with Magnus there and a bunch of people there that is anti-war, stop the wars. We can say Defund the Pentagon. That goes along with it completely.
Yeah. I'm also being very cautious
to talk about this.
They should. They should. And you can go to those conservative libertarians who are anti-war and hate the Pentagon too as well, because the fiscal part, that's all that stuff that you're saying right there is music to their ears. We're spending all that money. Oh my God, we're spending all that money. Also, the Ron Paul types, they talk about blowback. All that money is spent is going to come back and bite us in the ass because there's going to be blowback from it.
It's
Plain
just
and
different
simple.
reasons for doing it. Either way, it doesn't matter. Stop the fucking war, defund the Pentagon.
All of it. Just stop it.